Say, what's cracking, YouTube? It's your boy 16 to life, and I'm back like I'm on a parole violation. Yard down. Now, for those of y'all that's new to my page, in 1994, I got arrested. I was eventually sentenced to 16 years plus life. I served 24 years straight in the California prison system. During those times, I accumulated some good stories, and I'm going to share some with y'all today. If you want to binge watch and catch up on some of my older content, go to my YouTube playlist, and you'll see that I have my stories organized in different categories and topics, and you will definitely find something that you like. I'm going to try to get through this story. I got a little cold, so let's go, man. Now, this story takes place, I believe, around 2005, 2006. Initially, I was at a prison, a level 2 known as Corcoran, California Substance Abuse and Treatment Facility. Even though they had a few different yards, only 2 of the yards was treatment facilities. I was on a different yard. I was charged with stabbing somebody and sent to the hole. So when they took me to the hole, they walked me through what was known as it was like a 270 design. You guys can look that up. Eventually, I'll show you the difference between a 270 and a 180. But then they took me to another portion of the hole, and it was like, the best way I can describe it, it was like a maze or almost like an ant farm. Normally, in most holes in California, the building is like a big round 270 design with tiers on the top and the bottom, and you can look out and see other cells and stuff like this. The particular section they took me to was, like I said, an ant farm where all the cells were on one side of the wall. If you looked out the window, it might be a wall 7 or 8 feet away, and that's all you seen was the wall. You didn't see no other people back there. Also, so when you walk into the cell was, they had 2 cement slabs, maybe 6 feet, excuse me, maybe 6 feet apart on the ground. And they would give you a little thin mattress, and that's where you slept at. The only light allowed into the cell was like like maybe a moon roof or something in the top of the ceiling. And so that's where they had me at. I was in there for about a week and a half by myself, and then I guess a riot or something happened in another part of the facility, and they came and told me that I would have to get a CELLY in order to make room for people that they had coming in. So long story short, they ended up giving me a CELLY, and he went by the name of Mike. So his let's just say he was from 21st Street, which he wasn't, but that's just something I'm just doing for this story. His name was 21st Street Mike, but he was from a large gang in LA, and he went by that gang, the name of his gang first, and then his name, Mike. And so so he was probably maybe about 48 years old, maybe about 6'2", probably about 250, 260 pounds. He wasn't big muscularly. He was a big dude, but he was older and just kind of out of shape. And so he was coming from the 4 yard. So it turned out, as we started talking, that he was a MAC rep on the 4 yard. So what a MAC rep is, a MAC rep is a acronym for Men's Advisory Council. And the MAC rep, each race has a MAC rep, and they pretty much act like a liaison for the between the for the convict population and the administration to resolve problems or issues that's going on between the two, right? So how he wound up being in the hole was, one day on the 4 yard, I guess an incident had broke out between 2 Southerners, and so the yard went down, and excuse me, and staff responded to get this situation under control. Once they got the situation under control, they were walking back to their buildings or whatever, and of course, at the level 4 180s, you have to prone out, because that's where he was coming from. You have to prone out flat on your belly. So for whatever reason, a CO was walking past a Crip who happened to be from San Diego, and the Crip had a knife on him. Now, the CO wasn't going towards the Crip to get him. He just was walking past him. But for whatever reason, the Crip jumped up, and he started stabbing the CO. Now, you have some organizations and some people who are, I guess, under the thinking that it's not good to get caught with a knife. It's better to use it than to get caught with it. So excuse me. So for whatever reason, The Crip jumped up. He stabbed the CO. In turn, they ended up putting the whole black population on that yard on lockdown. Crips, Bloods, brothers from up north from the Bay, Kumi, 415s, whoever, Stockton Crips, everybody on that yard, non-affiliates. If you were black, you went on lockdown. They kept them on lockdown for a long period of time. So at some point, Mike, being the MAC rep, they let him out to go talk to different blacks and get a feeling of what's going on. And after a while, the blacks became angry at being held on lockdown for so long over what would normally be considered an isolated incident. So they was pressing the line, getting at Mike, telling him, to go to the administration and ask them, man, why are we being locked down for so long over what was an isolated incident? So during the meeting, the MAC rep Mike, he goes up in there and they basically let him know that the blacks will still remain on lockdown. You guys aren't coming off lockdown anytime soon. So when he returns back to the yard, he says, they asked him, hey man, what's going on with the program? He said something to the regards of, hey man, they keeping us on lockdown, so we just gonna have to do what we gonna have to do, So I guess upon hearing that, the correctional staff took that as he was making some type of threat to staff or he was inciting a riot. So they locked him up and brought him to the hole. And that's how me and him got to be cellies. Now, this dude, man, he was a miserable soul, He was extremely miserable. Start off, he was around 48 years old, and he had a unique situation, right? He was originally out of Ohio. After going into the army and whatever, he moved out to LA around the age of 22, 23. This big goofy dude wants to start gang banging and he gets put on the hood, right? So by the age of 23, normally most gang members have already accumulated their stripes, have made their name in the hood. They are whoever they're going to be. This dude starts gang banging around the age of 22, 23. He's from Ohio, so I'm sure he's definitely not getting a whole lot of respect in the gang world or whatever. And so eventually he goes to jail back and forth for a few things. And on this particular case, he had got caught up. He had been charged with his third strike. He had been fighting with his girlfriend. They had been in a relationship on and off. She would often call the police on him, send him to jail. I guess on this particular case, he was living in some apartments. I guess she was accusing him of messing with some of the girls around there. They got into a big fight or whatever. Once again, she called the police on him, and he was sentenced to his third strike. He got an astronomical amount of time. I believe 125 years of life, somewhere around there, right? And so, as he's explaining this story to me, keep in mind, this is 2006. I'm still deep in my criminal way of thinking, right? So I'm saying, hey man, you tripped out, honestly, I didn't have a whole lot of sympathy for the dude because here you are, a gang member, right? And so once a person calls the police on you, you were supposed to be out of there. The way I viewed that is, it was 100% his fault. Whether you was beating her, now if you was beating her, that's your fault right there. If you wasn't beating her and she was lying on you, and she called the police and snitched on you and lied on you or whatever, and you went back to her over and over again, that was also your fault. So, like I said, you getting put on a gang at the age of 22 to 23 years old, to me, played a whole lot in your sympathizing with someone who was calling the police on you. And so, like I say, man, this dude was a big miserable soul. In the whole, when you go back to the whole, if you're black, if you're white, if you're Mexican, depending on whatever organization you hang with, if you come back to the whole and you have charges that are acceptable, then you will be put on a list, and in the morning your name will be recognized. They will say good morning to you, and they'll say good night to you. So with me being black, pushing with the blacks in the morning, they say good morning in Swahili. In J Masabui Chill, in J Masabui Mike, in J Masabui Stone. It's one dude. He goes down a list and he says good morning to everybody. Now this would go on maybe about 6 o'clock in the morning. So Mike would wake up maybe about 5 o'clock, 4:30. He would go to the door and he'd just huff and puff. He'd just be standing at the door, man. And so after about a week of him doing this, I'd still be in the bed asleep, right? So one day he did it, one morning he did it, and I said, hey, homie. I said, excuse me. I said, hey, homie, I'm asleep, man. What's up with all that noise, man? It's early in the morning. He said, oh, man, my bad, man. I'm just miserable, man. The dude, so he went on to explain, he was 48, 49 years old. Outside of having an appeal ruled on positively in his favor, he feared that he would never get out of prison, and he was an extremely miserable dude. Nobody wants to be in prison, of course, but I was under the mindset we signed up for these streets. We knew what we was getting ourselves into, and so, of course, while everybody wants to go home, it came with the territory, man. And so if you couldn't deal with the consequences, don't hop in the game from the get-go, right? And like I say, on top of that, his girlfriend had sent him to jail. I'm pretty sure he was concerned with who was out there piping her down, you know what I'm saying? Now that he was locked up in there, he hadn't heard from her in a long time. He was extremely miserable, right? And so everybody's not cut out for prison, man. Prison is definitely something that will take its toll on anybody, especially if you be concerned with matters that you cannot change, right? And so he also, due to the fact that he had a whole lot of time, I got the feeling that he blamed his time on the system, and he was extremely angry and antagonistic toward those guys. I remember one time they came and searched our cell. Now, when you're in the hole, anytime you leave the hole, you are handcuffed. So it's a little tray slot that's in the cell door. They open that and they excuse me. They push our trays through there in order to feed us, and then we give them the trays back. So also when we exit the cell, we have to put our hands behind our back, stick our hands out that tray slot, then they'll handcuff us. Then he goes to the back of the cell, then I'll come put my hands through there, they handcuff us, and then once we're both handcuffed, that's when they remove us from the cell. So anytime you left the cell for whatever reason, we had to go through that procedure, whether it was going to the shower, going to the yard, going to see the nurse, whatever. So on this particular day, they took us out. We're going to the shower. So we get a 5-minute shower. I believe we shower like every 3 days. So sometimes when they take you to the shower, they search your cell. So when we came back from the shower and they put us in the cell, we could tell that they had searched our cell. They had been all through his papers and all that type of stuff. And he was extremely upset. Oh, so he goes to the door screaming and hollering, cussing the guards out and all types of stuff. He got the cussing the guards out to the point, now I'm over there, I'm like, dang, man, this dude is going crazy. I'm thinking that now the guards is probably just to try to run up in the cell and get him. And if they attempt to get him, I'm in the cell with him, so I can't mark out. I definitely got to help my celly, but in my opinion, he's putting us in a situation. This dude then took this way too far. He's screaming and kicking on the door and throwing tantrums. I mean, this dude is acting like a little 3-year-old if you take his toy from him. I mean, this dude is going crazy, bamming on the door and kicking and going crazy, right? So he's talking about they had messed with his legal work. He was also one of those dudes who he'd done a lot of legal work. Any situation he found that he could write the police up, he did. Like I said, he was very angry, and in my opinion, he took a lot of that anger out on having so much time toward the system. So after all this goes on, man, we in the cell, we chilling. Maybe about 10 minutes later, it's a northerner back there. He says, hey, chill, man, shoot your line. Telling me to slide my line, to fish my line to him so he could send me something. So I fished my line to him. We connected. He ended up sending me a kite. Basically on the kite, he was saying, what's up, chill, greetings to you and your celly. I heard the argument that your celly got into, and I have a knife down here. And tell him if he is willing, I will send him the knife if he wants to stab and put in work on the guard when he gets an opportunity. So I'm thinking like, oh, this about to get ugly, right? So I passed the kite to my celly. I said, hey, man, dudes down there sent us this kite, man. Check it out. So I sent him I gave him the kite. He declined. He didn't want to do none of that. He said, no, tell him. He said, no, tell him, I'm cool on that. I don't want to do that or whatever. So I wrote him back in the kite, said he declined the offer. So I don't know how they end up feeling about that dude, right? So one of the things he was upset about is they had pretty much hit him with a bogus charge when they sent him to the hole on trying to incite a riot. And I had went through the Title 15, also with the Title 15, and I said, hey man, they really can't charge you with that. And so he had he had appealed it, which is a 602. And you have so many, once you send in the 602 or no, that's what happened. So they had found him guilty of the charges, and so he appealed it. And so when they find you guilty of something, you have only so long to appeal it. And so he had sent it in, he had appealed it, sent it to the appeals coordinator, and then it been a long time past the time when he normally would get a response. And so he felt that they had took his mail or done something. So he ended up writing the appeals coordinator again, and some type of way he got it to him. I don't know if he handed it to a nurse or whatever, but he got a response a little later saying, hey, here's a copy of what you're looking for. But he said, the response said, I had been sent that information to you, or whatever he was looking for, 3 or 4 weeks ago. So obviously, yes, they definitely was messing with his mail. They definitely had took something from him. And so he did have some reason to be upset. While when you're in the hole, of course, there's nothing to do. I think every other day or something like that, we would get to go to the yard. We got to go to the yard, which is basically like some dog kennels, just me and him if we wanted. And it was really nothing to do but go outside and sit in that thing for 3-4 hours. So sometimes we would go just to get up out of the cell. So we've done a lot of talking up in there. He liked to talk. He told me also about a time when he happened to be in a prison known as Lancaster. Lancaster is maybe about an hour and some change away from LA. So you had a large amount of dudes from LA trying to go to Lancaster because it would be closer for their family to come and get visits and stuff like that, right? And so I heard a lot about Lancaster. I've never been there. For the most part, Lancaster is a prison that has a lot of black staff, a lot of black guards, also a lot of black convicts there, as well as other races, but it's predominantly a black prison, right? And he was explaining to me how Lancaster was extremely cool until at some point in time, for whatever reason, I forget if it was Crips or Bloods, they got into it and took off on the police. Later on, he told me as retribution for that act, as retribution for that act, what the staff ended up doing later on down the line, the blacks and the Southern Mexicans got into it. They got into an issue. So when they finally did let him out again, he said they released a small amount of blacks and a large amount of Southern Mexicans, and they got into a riot. And of course, the blacks they got messed up pretty bad. And then I believe later on, he told me he was involved in an incident where the guards were assaulted and he was sent to the hole. He was sent to the hole. They shipped him out of the prison and sent him to another hole. Now, this was like, once again, ate a little popcorn. This was like somewhere in the early 2000s or maybe the late 90s when the police was notorious for getting revenge on any convict that assaulted staff once they got to the hole. So he told me he had been in the hole maybe a week or two. He's in there chilling. Like I say, keep in mind, this dude is a big dude, about 6'2", 250, 260, somewhere around there. He said one night around 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, his cell door just opened. He said about 5 or 6 correctional officers ran up in there and boop, beep, boop, bop, beep, boop, beep, beep, bop, boop, bop, bop. He said they beat him bad, man. He said, hey, man, once again. He said, hey, chill, man. They beat me, man, to the point I cried, man. He said they beat me so bad. He said he believed they broke a couple ribs. And when he would use the bathroom, there would be blood. There was blood when he was using the restroom. So he got beat real bad, And so this dude was, he wasn't taking his time well, man. He was one of them woe is me type dudes, man. He was always brooding about something. He just had this disgusted look on his face like the time was killing him, man. So one day, we in the hole. Now, fortunately for me, I ended up going to my hearing and I was found not guilty of I was found not guilty of the stabbing charges. So, like I said, I came from a level 2. So I'm a little elated about that. I'm a lot of elated, if that's a word, right? Because I'm out of here now. I'm going back to the 2 yard, right? And so I'm just waiting for them to come and take me to a to committee, which is gonna be maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, and they'll assign me to go back to the yard, the 2 yard. So maybe after about 3 or 4 or 5 days, all of a sudden, they come get me. They say, hey, man, get dressed. They tell me, hey, man, get dressed. We taking you to committee. I don't know. My phone started ringing there, so I don't know if the recording stopped or whatever. So they they told me, hey, man, get dressed. We taking you to committee or whatever. So we'll be back to get you in a few minutes. So I get dressed. I go through the process. They take me out. As they're walking me over there, I hear the guards talking. They say that a riot had jumped off on one of the other yards between the Northerners and the Southerners. And one of the guards said, oh, man, that's a little messed up. He was in that particular incident. I guess the Northerners had got the short end of the stick. And the guard was saying, oh, man, that's messed up. He was saying at least they could give those dudes a fighting chance. So basically what he was saying was in that particular unit that the riot jumped off, it was a small amount of Northerners and it was a large amount of Southerners, and they ended up getting smashed. And so as I'm going, I go to my committee. They're in there talking and stuff. And once again, the phone is ringing. It's messing me up. They're in there talking and stuff, right? And so now they're asking, about is there any confidential informants and blah, blah, blah. So long story short, they go to talking now saying that I've been found not guilty and all this type of stuff, and that they were sending me to the level 4 180. Now, I don't have level 4 points due to a couple of fights I got into. I told you guys about that story where we had to hop on the blind dude's head. Boop, bop, beep, boop, bop. The blind dude was over there performing fellatio on dudes and stuff like that and lying about it. And so we hopped up on his head, actually the homies hopped up on his head, but I ended up being found guilty of that regardless. And due to another fight that I got in, my points were no longer, her exact words was the lady in the committee, my points was no longer conducive with level 2 living. And they were sending me to the 4 yard. So when she said that, I said, hey, I don't have 4 yard points. What you sending me to the 4 yard for? She said, well, too bad. You're just going to have to, it looks like you're going to have to shut your mouth and roll with the big boys. Oh, man, I was mad as hell, man. If I wasn't handcuffed, I think I might would have came across that table on her. She got at me like I'm some coward, like I'm scared to go to the 4 yard. Well, while I really didn't want to go back to a 4 yard coming from a level 2, it was what it was. So, like I said, she told me, looks like you're going to have to shut your mouth and roll with the big boys. So I had to say something. I told her, well, if one of them big boys get out of line, I'll be right back over here, And so they picked her. When they was through with that, with the hearing, I got up, I walked up out of there, man, and I ended up going to the 4 yard 180. But anyway, you already know what it is. It's your boy 16 to life. Resume normal program.